Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. I'm here with Bob Willis, CEO of Sun Summit Resources. Sun Summit put out a release this morning. It was, I guess you could say, a follow-up to the Discovery drill release that came out a couple of weeks ago. This release is about the 3D IP survey that was done in October and November. This is the first release of it. And before this came out, when I was talking to Sun Summit's geos a couple of weeks ago, they sort of said, wait until we get the modeling done in this IP and we get this out, because the IP is quite important. And, I don't generally expect much out of geophysical releases, especially when it comes to market acceptance or people getting excited. I mean, geophysics isn't as visceral as, say, a high-grade drill hole is. But seeing this morning, and I've already sent something off to my subscribers a few hours ago, I can understand why the management team here is pretty jacked about the results of this IP survey and how it ties in everything they've done so far. One thing I did want to clarify, I mean, I mentioned this in the alert this morning, I think it's the case. This survey was done sort of during the back half of the phase 2 drill program. So this IP didn't really help you with the last drill phase, hole spotting and targeting. It'll be used for the next drill phase spotting, right?
Yeah, no, that's correct. And I think the key there is that our drilling from last fall, albeit was prior to getting results from this IP survey, really identified that, and looking at this map, that drilling into areas of the yellowy color, if you will, as opposed to the bullseye red and purples, in fact, did identify some escalated, gold values, and actually were some of our better, broad 100-meter plus intercepts of 0.6, 0.7, 0.8 gram gold. So really, we've used that to now model into, in relationship to this new program, kind of our go forward plan. So I think it's was really important that if you look at the green dots, if you will, on this map, you would think, wow, they're kind of not around the bullseyes, but we didn't have the bullseyes. So again, we'll talk in a little bit here about that relationship, whether it's important to go right down the center of these things or on the periphery or whatever. But I think these maps really demonstrate the magnitude and the potential of the Buck property. So that's the key for us.
And the other thing that was talked about today, I mean, we'll go into the IP in a bit more here in a second, but the other thing that was talked about today was these faults, which were kind of sort of there before, but I mean, I know you guys have added quite a few of them, a lot of structural detail. And you think these faults, I mean, they seem to be important in the sense that they're bounding things, but you also think there was some movement on these faults, and that maybe helps explain why the high grade stuff that you hit in hole 12, which was a very impressive intercept, wasn't as obvious at surface maybe as the horseshoe stuff. You maybe don't get as much geochem off it because the zone's simply quite a bit deeper because everything's been kind of shifted down a little bit by these faults.
Yeah, exactly, Eric. And I think I think the key here is that, we call it kind of a stair step down drop from the left side of the slide, the Silica Fault, then moving westward to the Central Fault and then to the Western Fault. And these faults are very subtle. There's not a lot of surface expression, especially in the Western Fault. So there's some interpretation there. But the historical drilling, on a planar feature, presuming there's no movement, no north-south faults here, one would wonder, well, for example, to the west of the Western Fault where we see C2 anomaly that's open. So you think, well, that's not historical drilling was not necessarily right over C2, but over in the trench zone, and the holes were short. They were 100 meters thereabouts, and so on a historical planar feature, yeah, it might not have been that exciting, but with this information, it really shows that there's a down drop starting from the east silica fault. Maybe it's 100 meters or so between the central fault and the western fault down drop, and then further to the west, the western fault maybe is down drop another 100 meters or so, and that's really, really evident in our interpretation on our cross section. So, again, it's really, really a result of our geo team that's really done a tremendous job in identifying this, and it's ongoing. We're not there yet. We're doing some additional geophysical work, and but it's enough to get us drilling again very shortly.
And before, I'm going to flip to the cross section in a minute here, but before we move on, just to be sure that the viewers sort of understand what we're looking at here. These are essentially, oops, I ended up doing that anyway. These are essentially plan maps, but what they are is depth slices. So the one on the left, this one here is 150 meters below surface. This one on the right is 300 meters below surface, and you can see how the expression of these anomalies changes as you drop down 100. Keep doing that. Drop down 150 meters. Everything shifts. Everything is kind of shifted this way, but it's also certainly in the case of C4, which is barely even evident. But C2, especially, you take a look at how sort of small and relatively low strength it is at 150 meters depth. You get down to 300, and this is quite a large anomaly. And in terms of IP anomalies, you're getting up to 50, 60 milliseconds per second. That's actually a very strong characterability anomaly. Like there's definitely some juice here to create this thing. But to kind of, and the last thing I'll point out is that these stars you see here, that's the suggested collar locations for the next phase of drilling that starts in a week or two. I believe there's 16 of these collars so far. I know they're still doing this, but to kind of get a better handle on why this stuff is important and why they get excited about it, we were going to take a look at the cross section now. Cross sections east-west, kind of cutting right pretty much through the middle of those plan maps we saw a second ago, and we're looking to the north as we look at this screen. Do you want to walk us through what you see here and what your team kind of got jazzed up about once this stuff was delivered?
Yeah, so I think firstly on this cross section, the pink blobs, if you will, I think that's a 30 millisecond outline. Okay. So on the previous slide, when we looked at the plan, or the down-looking plan of the entire area, the yellow actually, which down to say a 20 millisecond, is really is a much larger magnitude. We selected 30 just because that's a very, very strong anomaly. And part of that is that if we look at our discovery drill hole 12, we can see that where it's colored under the word horseshoe zone in the upper right, we drilled through what we call this mosaic breccia. It's a very, very consistent looking mineralization, 40 plus meters of plus gram material. And then we drilled down through, and that happens to be in a small pink blob. So then we kept drilling, and then we went down into what we didn't know at that point in time was another little pink blob called C1. Now we just skinnied the edge of it by default, if you will. And I want to emphasize that these pink blobs, if you will, it's not a definitive edge to it. These are just interpretations. So these are just diffuse sulfides that are through the rock and are picking up an electrical current. But if we look at the high grade intercepts, it happened to skinny C1, with one of our better intercepts. And as we went down, further down the hole, we got into some additional intercepts toward the bottom of the hole. So, possibly C1 drags down into that area, we don't know. And then if we move further to the left into the larger C2 anomaly, there is a fault. There is that vertical dotted line that so we talked previously about a possible 100-meter thereabouts, normal fault down drop. So if you take C1 and move it up 100 meters, and it kind of lines up with C1. So we don't really know yet how it all aligns, but now that we do have the offsets, or the what we think are the offsets in these faults, which we're not sure they were known prior to this. So it's pretty easy to see where C2 is, which is obviously a very, very large anomaly. And at surface, 100-meter drill holes 30, 40 years ago would not have tested that. Equally important, I think Eric alluded to this, that to the left or the west of the western fault dotted line, there was no surface geochem, no outcrop showing any anomalies of any sort. And we went, well, okay, there's nothing over there. And we even kind of looked at it and went, well, interesting, but what does that all mean? So it wasn't really until until the group did this interpretation that we really, honed in on this, probably a down drop here. And as you can see on our planned drill holes, we plan to not only skinny some of these, but go right through the guts of them and see what it really means. So to us, it's a very, very compelling geological environment. And, again, just backtrack a little bit on the right-hand side of the slide, under the horseshoe zone there, where that smaller pink blobs are over there, we can clearly see that, that there's, elevated or, very good mineralization of gold is associated with these chargeability highs. And, with the chargeability highs, there's always pyrite, there's other sphalerite, there's other sulfite. So, our interpretation here is that these chargeability anomalies are very important. And, again, not sure yet, but looking at discovery hole 12, how it's skinnied C1, it's going to be interesting to see what our planned hole in the center of this slide going down to C2 means, skinning the left-hand side or the right-hand side of that. So it's a, as Eric said, our crew's back on site, getting prepped for getting going again. So it's, it's kind of a new story. It's really a geological environment that I don't think that we even understood existed, 6 months ago. But again, it's through the diligence of our group that's really discovered this. So.
Yeah, and you can see looking at these, it's not perfect because we're basically looking at one vertical slice, and these I'm sure these chargeability anomalies are well, they're irregular even on here, but you can see when you look at some of these areas that the correlations and those those shallow holes up in this area, I mean, those are some of the best, well, they're the best near surface grades, I believe, anywhere in the project. Those are in new Sun Summit drill holes, and then there's a pretty obvious relationship here. And again, with this stuff, there's a pretty obvious relationship. You don't really have to arm wave too much or reach too much to assume there's a connection between the gold grades and sulfides. I mean, the areas that carry gold have got sulfides in them. I don't think it's 1-to-1, but there's enough correlation there that it's pretty important. And one thing I would mention in the news release today, I mean, we're just looking at one vertical slice here, but the dimensions of C2, for instance, I believe were given as 300 by 350 by 650 meters. And I believe we're getting down to essentially this is, you're probably getting down here to as deep as this IP can see. So the stuff below this it's getting more diffuse and less certain. So, I mean, it shows like there's an edge here, but that may well just keep going down. It's partially a function of the equipment. But when you look at that kind of scale, I mean, that's what Buck hasn't really had before. I mean, you had areas where you got long, low grade intercepts they get the occasional, not that often, you get the occasional higher grade thing. But really, this last drill phase that Sun Summit did, it's the first time you're seeing the combination of higher grades, especially very nice grades near surface, and much higher grades over much broader intervals. I mean, this thing looks like it's got real scale potential now with higher grade material, not just scale potential with stuff that's 0.3 or 0.4. And that, I mean, to me, that's a real game changer. So what are the plans going forward here in the next month or two, Bob? I mean, you guys are going to get at it with the drill fairly quickly.
Yes, and just before I get to that, just to look at this slide again, the kind of pink outline, what we call the interpreted mineralized envelope, if you will. I mean, at the Buck property, it's like, regardless, I would say almost regardless of rock type, it's juiced up with gold, meaning that inside that interpreted mineralized envelope, it's, you know, it's in the area of 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 grams per ton gold, like throughout the entirety. Now, that's not really eye-popping grades, but I guess what the importance is that there's a huge engine here that's juiced up this entire area. And so our job is, and I think what we've been successful at so far is to try and determine where there's a little bit higher grade. But having said that, when we start getting the magnitude inside these, you know, these mineralized envelopes of, you know, lower grade, but it's gold. So it's that, to me, is a very important factor, you know, as we develop this project. And I just wanted to point that out, because a year from now or less, that could be an important point that we're going to be talking about. So as far as getting going on the property gain, our group has mobilized to Houston. We have all of the group that we're going to need for this program. I think we said in our release that I think a number of holes was 16 or 17 holes, you know, over 5,000 meters now. And again, that's, I think I mentioned this in my last conversation, was that, you know, that's a number that we'll start with. But, you know, we think that the opportunity here at Buck is that we'll continue on after that. And so on site, you know, again, with the COVID protocol, we've rented 2 homes in Houston. We have a very large core logging facility in Houston. It's a 20-minute drive south of Houston on all-weather road to Buck. And so right now we're just plowing out the roads with a little bit of snow, getting some new drill pads ready to go, and the driller is ready to go. And you know, it's taking a little longer with the COVID thing, as we all know. But the other thing is that we are, for the next week or so, we pulled out hole 12 to kind of have a look at it again, to visually see what it is, where these, you know, these high grade intercepts are. Because yes, we can see in the photos, and yes, it's been logged with mineralization, but, you know, we need to see in detail what that means. That'll be very important going forward in our daily logging. So yeah, we're excited to get going in the next couple of weeks here. And you know, I expect there may be a period of time here, whether it's, you know, 5, 6, 7 weeks, where we have one drill, you know, but I expect that we may ramp up beyond that. But again, we need to just get going on this. And yeah, it's exciting times. Absolutely.
And one thing I'll point out for those that aren't familiar with the story, because this is something Bob and I have talked about, and this is something I know has been bugged about for the last 3 weeks. The company's in pretty good shape financially. You certainly don't need any money for the 5,000 meters or 10,000 meters or more, for that matter. You kind of get the sense watching the stock trade that there are traders working on the assumption that there's going to be, you know, a near or even near-ish term financing. And when I talk to you, you've been pretty adamant on this subject, Bob. You want to respond to those rumors?
I will. There will not be a near or nearish financing.
Yeah, Bob's been very adamant about this. I know, you know, not surprising when something looks interesting in a trading volume. People show up with money and they want to do financings, but Bob's been very adamant that he feels it's the only fair way to treat his current shareholders and new shareholders, and guys like me that have been around, and we all agreed to do a small consolidation last year because that was part of the deal to bring Buck in, and with that history, Bob's been pretty adamant that he's not going to go dilute right now. He doesn't need the money for this drilling or probably for the phase after. So, I mean, when the time's right, I'm sure it'll happen, but the time and the price just aren't right now. He wants to get some holes down here. So is there anything else coming? I mean,
Yeah, and sorry, I missed that, Eric.
is there anything else coming? And do you have any other comments on the financing? Like, you guys, can we expect any other news? I guess the next news is going to be we're starting drilling, I guess, right?
Yeah, there's that, and just back on the financing. I mean, we talked about the first handful of drill holes, maybe 5,000 plus meters. I mean, that will burn maybe 1/3 of our treasury. So not to be arrogant about financing. I mean, we understand our business, and I think that we. But again, Eric, as you say, it's, we took on the Buck property and asked our shareholders to do a small consolidation, and that was approved. And so, we're being very stingy on any dilution at this point in time. So I think we're well under our way there. Now, as far as I think this weekend or early next week, we're doing a drone mag survey. Which we're just starting that, and we feel that we did a mag survey last fall, but we don't feel it was as successful, meaning that it just didn't have the density that we would like. So anyway, we're doing a drone survey for mag, and what that may lead us to is that we know that based on the last round of drilling last fall, that there are some dikes here, that some are pre-mineral, some are post-mineral, some are maybe syn-mineral. So what does that mean is that we think that there's some of the higher grade mineralization that we've seen in the last program appears to be close to, near, next to, whatever, some dikes that are very subtle to map in the drilling. And so our mag, we think, based on the detailed work that our group's done, the mag, may be able to give us some orientations of those dikes. And so not that, at this point in time, we're not going to talk too much about their importance, but they are important. And there's lots of them. And so, our drill program may be rejigged a little bit in the next month or two here to transect these and get a correct orientation. But so that's going to be exciting. We'll get that done prior to us starting drilling by the end of the month, and integrate that into our plan. So that's I think that's a very important part of our progress here. Is we know that there is a relationship to the higher grade mineralization. We just don't know exactly how or where or the orientation of these things. So anyway, so that's a pretty important part going forward.
Okay, so there's going to be there'll be more, more, not necessarily modification, but maybe more resolution of this model. And I think it's important, I think, to point out again, I did, when I sent out the alert to subscribers when the drill discovery was announced, a lot of what you see, most of what you see on this map in terms of structures, certainly the IP, obviously, but if you looked at their updated geology, it'd be the same with those. A lot of that stuff came out of work that was done through 2020 by Sun Summit. I mean, there really wasn't a model here before. I mean, several companies have drilled, a bunch of holes here, a bunch of holes there. A lot of those holes did have 50, 80, 100 plus meters of 0.6, 0.7, but no one could ever make the dots connect before. And this is really the first time. This is really the first time you've seen a coherent model for this that does seem to explain everything. And I think that's really, really important. If this is going to turn into this, what we all hope for, that's what it's going to take, is generating the model, which they've just done, that allows for efficient targeting. They put out a great discovery hole a couple of weeks ago. It's a great team. Sun Summit's got a very, very deep bench, very big technical team. Bob's just letting these guys and gals do their thing, and it's working great so far. They're about to start drilling again in a week or two, minimum 5,000 meters. I suspect they just keep going once they start. But this is a great story. You're in luck because the market's been kind of lousy this month, that you can basically go and buy this stock for the price it was at when they announced a drill hole with 4 separate high-grade intercepts in it, and they're about to start drilling again. So Sun Summit Resources, SMN on the venture, SMN RF, I believe it is on OTC. Great story, great group, totally financed, ready to go. Thanks for coming by today, Bob. And just so people know, Bob is on a satellite connection, not a cell connection. He's not slow to listen. He just, we've got it's like I'm talking to him and he's sitting on a satellite or something. We got about a 6 or 7 second satellite play that we're dealing with.
Great. Thanks very much, Eric. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Okay. We'll get together once you get out your next set of high-grade holes.
Stay tuned. It's coming. Thanks a lot.